Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about being mediocre and dealing with it. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, how can I deal with the terrible knowledge that I am the mediocre programmer at work? And the short answer is join the club, my friend, and learn the one thing every single human has inherently learned. It's just that you believe now that you're different. Let me explain. So, being mediocre, let's start by talking about that. What the hell does that mean? Does mediocre mean that you are bad at programming? Because for some reason everybody believes that if you're not a superstar programmer, whatever that means, then anything else is really bad. Mediocre means many things, depending on who you ask. In my world, mediocre means that you are nothing special. And I don't think I know a single programmer at all who believes that they are special. At least not on a conscious level. They might be all smug like inside, I suppose, but most of them don't actually have that idea. I have talked to programmers that I look up to, both in my personal life and like publicly, in public speakers and stuff like that. And I've never seen them ever kind of behave as if they were something more than a mediocre programmer. I've even talked to them in real life, and if you give them any type of praise, they will just immediately kind of downplay the whole thing and say, no, I'm just an average Joe. Doesn't really matter if they've worked for prestigious companies or on very, very advanced projects. They still feel the same way. So I want to kill the first thing that I kind of took away from this question, and that is that negative tone regarding mediocre. Mediocre, guys, is just fine. Because if you are a mediocre programmer, you're fucking employed, most likely. Being a bad programmer is not a great thing, because that usually ends up with you going through a lot of personal anxiety. It usually ends with you might get fired, you might have issues, other type of things that come along with being bad at your job. But if you're mediocre, then fucking join the club. Almost everybody is mediocre if you ask them. Heck, I'm sitting here talking in a bathtub with a bunch of, I don't know what these are, shampoos or something like that. And I still think that I'm mediocre. I'm kind of weird as well, I will admit that, but let's call it mediocre and weird. And if you ask my coworkers that I truly admire and look up to, they will say that they're mediocre and self-conscious as fuck. So this thing that being mediocre is a thing, it's not. Everybody's mediocre depending on how you look at it. So, how do you deal with that? Well, it's very simple. Let's ask the fundamental question. Why do you feel like being mediocre is a bad thing? Why do you feel like this is you pretty much, because it sounds like you talk about this as being some type of failure on your part. And then I need to ask the question, what type of environment have you been brought up in where the only way for you to feel any type of self-value is by being extraordinary? If you live in a world or in a community where the only way for you to feel good about yourself is by being extraordinary, then you must be in good company, because there must be a fuck ton of people who are just walking around feeling really shitty all the time. And maybe there's a 1% there somewhere who you can basically just look down on everybody else, and they are the only people who are happy. It becomes a perspective type of deal, this, guys. It becomes a matter of how do you view success? How do you view the thing that you are doing? Because the thing is, if you only measure your self-value and your self-satisfaction by some most likely very subjective success factor, how fast are you at coding, how many pats on the shoulders do you get, how many promotions do you get, etc., etc. If that's the only thing that matters to you, then shit, you're gonna be in for a really, really, really rough time. Maybe that is what you want. Maybe you want to strive for the peak of the capitalist ladder, but I don't know. All I can tell you is that I would like to highlight something for you. Maybe this is something you haven't thought about before, or maybe that is just something that you conveniently forget, because that's something that we do sometimes when we want to feel a little bit sorry for ourselves. And that is that we forget that there's a fuck ton of stuff that we are really shitty at. without even asking to be measured against anybody in it. I'll give you an example. I will be the first person to admit that I will never ever compete in the Olympics. I will never ever do that. And if you compare me to an Olympic runner or an athlete or something like that, I will be a fucking shit comparison. I will be the slowest motherfucker who ever went on that into that arena, and I will be the fat guy at the end trying to just basically make it to the finish line. That's what I'm going to be. If you compare me to the richest, most famous Fortune 500 company owners, I will never ever be as rich as they are. Never, ever. But you see, the thing is, I never asked to be compared with these people, ever. And I don't really care if somebody compares me to them, because it would be to most people, this would be a very weird analogy. You would very clearly see immediately that, oh, well, I'm just an average person, and I haven't spent most of my life trying to build something or going to the track every single morning and every single night, most likely, for most of my life to achieve these things. So of course, it would be a very weird comparison. And that's the thing that I'm telling you. That's exactly what you're doing. You're just selectively looking at, oh, I'm a mediocre programmer based on... You're just basically hurting yourself. That's all you're doing. Why don't you sit there and feel bad about that you're not a billionaire? Why don't you feel bad about that you're not the fastest man or woman alive? Why, and at the same time, the best video game player or whatever? Why aren't you doing that? Well, because for some reason, this thing, programming, and you being good at that matters more to you than all of the other comparisons that you could possibly make. So what I want you to take away from this is that maybe being a mediocre programmer is actually a very good thing, because it means that you have at least acquired the skills to actually make a living from your craft. How many truck drivers do you think sit around and reflect on if they're a mediocre truck driver? For most people, a job is just a job, guys, and being mediocre is not a bad thing. The thing that is bad is if your personal value, your own self-value is tied into how much praise you get from somebody else, or if someone else considers you to be extraordinary. Do things for yourself. Use your own measurement tool. Measure success the way that makes you the happiest. Because trust me, as I said, there are so many comparisons and ranges and groups and other factors that I could compare you to where you would look absolutely horrible in comparison to all the other successful motherfuckers out there. So why are you doing this? There's no reason to. Nobody would expect you to compare yourself with somebody who has a very different life position from the one that you have. We're all born with a deck of, with a set of cards, and all we can do is to play the cards that we have been dealt as well as we can. And if you get the choice, choose to look at yourself as someone who is actually happy and proud of the achievements that you make, and continuously try to improve yourself, instead of trying to just look at how bad you are in comparison to some other person who has a completely different life situation. Have a great day.